petu takiaka. Otani ki petu takimarama. O piko roko wakato kachi. O kuti a te toi ora whakai o nuku whakai ora. Otani ki e arai. O hongo haramai teto. Haumie huie. Ai e. O te li tuatahi. I tō tātanei matsui te rangi. Hio nui, hio te matoho, hio te mana. Hio tiki te rangi. Nā i ho mai. Nā i tango. O reira, tēnā koe e te matu. O te mi tuarua. Ki ngā tini petu o te rangi. Aere. Aere atua ki hae, ki nui ki hae, ki rā ki hae, ki pāmāmā, ki honunga wairua. O te mi tuatori. Kia tātou te huara. Ngā mihi o te ata. Kai te hohaurongo. A tēne te niki a koutou e whai ake nei. Mā tikanga. A te aratau whai tia a tāne nui arani. E mihi i kawana ki a koutou. Nau mai. Ara mai. Ara mai ki tēnei whare tā hutu mōwai. A tō tātou nei, tūpuna, hawai ki roa. Kei wainanu i a mātou. A te ahitahutangu. O tō tātou nei marae, o ngā tirunga mau mātou. Tēnā koutou. Tēnei te mihi, hoki ki a koe, te rangatira. Te matua Seamus. Kaua ware au. O mahi, mana ki tiaki a mātou. I ngā rā mātou, o paheri atu nei. O reira, tēnā koe te rangatira. O wai au e tuaki nei. Ko ka hurana ki tōku maunga whakahira. Ka titiro whakararo ki tōku o wangarararo mō mukutuararo ki rangatira. O ngā tiko humunu tōku iwi. O ngā tiko opora tōku hapu. O koromata te marae, koromata, koromatu, o koromata. Aiha. Ko nuhuna o te whare tipuna. Ko matari ki te whare ka. Ko taki timu te waka. Ko tamate ari ki nui te tanata. Ko rātou ko au. Ko au ko rātou. E ko au ko. Te whakaua nui atu te o koutou. Tēnā tātou, i runga i te kaupapa o tēnei rā. Wehe anau te rekereka, o tō koutou mahi rangatira. O reira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā, roi.
Nau mai ki rata
te whare koha ki roa te tūpuna whakaruru hau. Tiai ngā petu a tini e.
Nā kaha tahi tiai.
I aro i te maru koroa, i aroha e tū. Tāmata whenua, tautou ngā wai tapu e.
Nā whitia te tirohanga.
Kia rātou mai, marae ngā koha tātai, heke a kui a korona e.
Haere ki te tohuarewa, haere ki te aratia tia tāne, ki
te ake ai ngā kātāwhaki ki te rangi nui, rangi tūhaha, ki te tiki o rangi, haere, haere. E kore mātou e ware i a koutou. Whakamau ngā mahara a tāhua, ngā mahara mātua, ngā mahara o te rongopai, o te rangi Māori e, ngā kōrero, monehira, e haka ane i roto o whakaaro e tēnei rā. Hutia te rito o te harakeke, kai hea te tomako e ko, whakatairangi, nere ki ruta, nere ki tai, nere ki ruta, nere ki tai. Mau e ki mai kia hau, hea ha, te menu, wa te au, ma kue ki atau ka whea. We tangata, we tangata, we tangata. Mō reira, o ku tūpuna, o ki ai, kore mātou i ware koutou, haere, haere, haere atūra. E te whare, tōku whare. Oi ki roa, tūpuna rongo nui, te tino mohi ana mātou ko ai koe, tino mohi ana mātou nohi a koe, te tino tūpuna te tini o ngā uri o tini raumano, te wārui o tāne tū ane ngari ngai me ko tāne whakapiripiri no tui tā huru mō a tāne, nō reira tūtonu, tūtonu, tūtonu. Te pai tapu o tuakana. Ngā kaitiaki o te pai tapu o hua ki pauri o tēnei tapu wā. E mihi aroha ki a koutou. Kare he kuku he whakaatu. Taku aroha o koutou. Ngā tauhira o te wānanga. I mohi ana hau ko tēnei te matapihi. Ai, te matapihi mo te ao whānui o ngā taongo o mātua tūpuna. Ko te kete tuauri, ko te kete tuate, ko te kete aranui. A kui māporoma. Engari whakamau ko te kōrero o te tūpuna. Ko te tumuaki. Rauri mo kai. Kei te hia kai. Kei te hia kai te ahuri mo koutou. Ngā rangatira mua pōpō. Nō reira kia mau, kia ū, kia kaha. Kia kaha i te tikanga, i te kaupapa, i te whakaaio o te ao. Whakarangi mai e te ao. I tēnei ao huri, tēnei ao kiko, ki tēnei ao pakanga. Te wāhanga tuaru o tātou nei ngā uri o i o te matua. Kia toa. Kia toa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Huri noa te whare. Kia koutou i tautoko ana i tēnei kaupapa. Ngā kai whakahaere. Tuakana Chad, Rauri. Te tikana te kōrero, te kai o te rangatira i kōrero. Te kai o te tinana he mahi. Te kai o te ngākau, te aroha. Te kai o te wairua, te whakapono. Te kai o te hinengaro. Te mātauranga me, te rangi Māori, te rongo pai. Oira te kai o te hinengaro o tēnei a. Kei waianui o i nei wānanga, ka tai ai. Ka whakauti pai i nei mea ka tōno reira tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou. Huri noa, kia tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora tātou katoa. tia te āpiti hono tātou te hungora Ngāti rongo mau. Āpiti hono tātou I tūtonu te tueru I hikotonu te kaupapa o te tumua. Āpiti, tēnā kōrero. Ko te maru ni e ahu mai tiki orangi, ko te maru e ahu mai te toia nārami, ko te maru e ahu mai Hawaii. Waha tunuku pukaho turangi, wanga mai hinuku, wawa mai hirangi, tūturi o piti whakamaua kia tīna, tīna, uye! Oie! Tautoko ana ngā mihi po mihi ki ngā mate. Rai, tātou, a macho tipuna ko wheturangi tia, ka tika, a me hu te reo tīpapa o te mātini wairua. A kei a koutou, te kāhui, kahurangi, haere atu rā, haere atu rā. Rātou kia rātou, o wheturangi tia tātou kia tātou, te hungaura, a tēne te mihi ka tātou. A kā tira mo rā. Kahuri, taku mihi, te tuatai, I tō tātou ne matune te rangi mana maketanga whakatau I hone ki rona tātou te nera. Nō reira I raro I ona kitanga e tūtonu ahau, e noho tonu tātou I roto I te ahuru mō ai o tēnei a tātou ne tupuna whare Hawaii ki. Ka tāhuri hoki ki te pau mātua o tēnei whare rā ko Hawaii ki roa pa moi a huarare. Ka puta ko au okahu. Nā okahu, ko tunu a te ariki are, te miri te ariki tūtūrangi kehu, ko papa ka moi arangi nui. Ka puta ko tāne nui arangi hine ahuone, hine ahurangi hine tītama hine manuhiri te pōatu. Te pōatu te kahurangi hine, kapurangi hine, rauwharangi hine, tauri ka moi a tiki. Ka puta ko uru ngā mana I orangi, wairangi te ao tū, te ao hore, te ahi, te kuru maranga, te ao taru ai tū, te ao kena mō uri, uri mōre, kareka mohiku pai, mohiku taura, ko whiro nui. Tā wake tā whangawhangatama ki te hau, tama ki te kapua hau, te horo, te ngana, ho haurangi, te atamai te ao kāwhaki, tauranga, te kōrahi tūpiu, haerenga aua tea, ka toi te huata. Ko ruarangi, ka moi aronga ueroa. Ka puta, ko awa nui arangi, ko awa roa, ko awa tūmati ki te rangi, ko pare nui te rā, ko awa mōre hurehu I rakewa, ka papuru mai ngā uri katoa, te waka mātātua, ko tōra, te ariki, e te rangatira, tuake ana tō tūpuna ko tōra, tuake ki te pakitara ai pukana ana mai a koe. Tā reira, kai te rangatira ngai tūhoi, Ngāti kahu minu ki wairarapa, ngāti tūwhareto. Ka tira mo tēnu. Ka huri taku mihi kia koutou, kai ako koko kairangi, koutou ngā waiwai kai kapua, ko tānoa noa te tapu o te rangi. Koutou, e mahi ngā mahi whakahirahira I te ao nei, puna te rongoa mo te ao. Kia hauhia ki te rongo, kia horahia ki te kura, kia tāhia nei te tāhua, kia tāmau a te rongo take, kia katia te tatau paunamu, koe ne ngā tikanga ko mā kuima, e mauana mātau, tātau hoki, ai nei rā whakamutunga, I mui te hoki mamai a te mihai, ara ko I kreit. Ara, ko tāne nui arangi. I runga I tērā whakaaro, te whakapono, ngā timanako me te aroha, te atua, kia kā koutou I runga I te huarahi, I hi koe aere, a tāne nui arangi I tōna pikitanga ki ngā rangi tūhaha ki te tihi o manon. I roko anga tura, ko I o matua kore anaki,
I riro ai, iho ai ngā kete o te wānanga, ko te kete tuauri, ko te kete tuatea, ko te kete aronui. He rauto e taua kete aronui, ko ngā tikanga o te rongonga. Ngā tikanga whakai o tangata ki te rā. Ka reira kia kaha kōtau, i rungi o kōtau mai i hoho rongo. Nā reira, ka re tō roa te kōrero i tēnei wā ko te tūmanako, kia kaha kia u, kia mana wanui i runga i tēnei hikoi, haere, tai atu rā i te taumata o te oranga. E ki ana te kōrero a te tohunga i noho nei, i roto i tēnei whare, nā kōrero, tikanga, e pāna ki enei taonga tuku iho, ngā mātua tupuna. Ara, ko tame taurima, tēnei kōrero. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapapau namu te moana, kia tere te kāro hirohi i mua i tō huarai. Reira, koutou mā, ku parata, ku whānau, tēnā koutou, kurinoa ki tō tātou ne whare tēnā tātou katoa. Ngā tirono mai, ia ko te rongo, ia ko te kura, hoa kera, ko te rongo marai, ko te rongo whare, kinga topi to katoa o te aue, tāhia nei te tāhua, whakawhirina i te whaia, i te kahurangi, eke ana, ike, kia ta maua i te rong, take. Areira, tēnā koutou, kurinoa ki tō tātou le whane tēnā tātou katoa. Ka whakakapi tēnei wahanga, ngā tikanga Maori, i runga te karakia kia whakatūwhera hia te kaupapa o te rongo. Ke whakaara te rongo i te ao. Nō reira, rino i tātou. Te tātou mātou matuterangi tēnei mātou kamiki au kumunga tuatu nei ui tuaroro tēnei ata. Whakamoimiti mātou o mātou. Whakaaro ki a koe mo ngā manakitanga o te rā. Manakitanga kai wangini a mātou, tanua hoki ki o mātou whānui, tai atu rā ki o mātou nei kainga, wā hino hoki. Nerere pā, atu whirahia na mātou tēnei huihuinga, rongo nui, ke whai ape te rongo mātāne. Nā rere te matua whakatau mai i runga i tēnei rōpū a tō wairua, arataki, e awhina, e manaki, e tiaki, nā ki tia hoki, nā kai kōrero, kōrero hana, hana ki te kaupapa o te rā. Nā ki tia mai a taringa, mātou e rangonana ki ngā kupu e kōhimuhimu ana, te tangi o te wairua, nā rira e te matua, tēnei te mihi kia koe, mau o tō aruka noa, me te manaki tama hoki, a tau tama, ona hāhi, whakatau anō, i enei rā whakamutunga i te matakato o te whenua. Ka whetai hoki ana mātou mo te poropiti nei hana, ona kōrero, te māngai o te atua. Nā reira, tēnei tō mātou inoi kia koe tēnei wā i runga i te ingoa o ihu krai te tō mātou nei kai whakaora. Āmene. speak English now. So all that was to say something very simple. Welcome. It took a little while, but just one word. But if you're doing it properly, that's the way to do it. So we'd like to recognize very special person, especially this morning, who took the time to join us as the Vice President of Operations at Polynesian Cultural Center, and stood to welcome you as our visitors from afar. And that's our Senior Vice President, Delson Moy. So I'd like to first acknowledge her araba. This place was the place where she started her work at the Polynesian Cultural Center as a demonstrator guide, twirling the poi. Now she stands as the Vice President who tells me what to do, and I tell the people what to do with the poi as well. So she's still got her finger on the poi. So we've got some family here from BYU-Hawaii, previous students and family. So we express that welcome to all of you in this space of Ahu Mowai, which is the safe, cozy haven we refer to as the pōku, or the womb of our fire on Mother Earth. That's the symbolism of this place. And so here, there is normal. Here there is peace, whakai o tangata, peace established and spread. Along with all of your words that we've spoken today, we hope you enjoy your time here as you listen also to the impressions of the Spirit and what each of us can do individually, collectively, as we move the work of the Lord forward. So I acknowledge Chad and Maori here amongst us, and their crew who were here early hours, late hours last night, early hours, and all of your support of the Polynesian Cultural Center. We hope to see you sometime throughout the afternoon. We do a performance here on the stage. We're okay, generally. We'll do our best for you as you come in and join us in the rest of the islands of Polynesia. With that, brothers and sisters, hope you have an awesome day. We'll turn the time over to your Superman.
Well, the good part is that all the formalities are done, so I can just go straight into English to all of you today. But let me begin by saying aloha. Sitting here, I can't think of a better place to have a conference on peace building. Kim mentioned that this is the domain of rongo. In our culture, inside this building, there is no arguing. People must leave here with a consensus because rongo, or the God of peace, this is his domain. The carvings you see represent ancestors. There's a carving that hopefully you can see that goes right around the whole building. It isn't even broken by the door. It goes above the door, it goes across there, goes right around and above the door at the back as well. That is called papaka. Papaka is a crab. And what it is doing, it's grabbing the ankles of our ancestors and it's telling them to be unified, to be one. So meetings in these buildings didn't end until there was consensus. And so people had to use wisdom. People would sit at the feet of their ancestors, look across at people who were sitting underneath their ancestors and remember to see their humanity. Remember to see not only them, but those who went before them and who they represent. And so they had to open their hearts and minds to leave here without any conflict. That doesn't count as part of my 15 minutes, Sydney. I wasn't supposed to say that. It just came out. Anyway, I am thankful for the opportunity to be here. Hopefully this is working. Is that on that way? Yeah, it is. I want to start with a quote. So thankful to have a chance to meet Dave and Patrick and recognize now the men who put together this amazing book. Grateful in these last couple of days to have a chance to read from its pages and learn. There's one point I want to point out when we start talking about our topic today of practicing. So Latter-day Saints do not need to wait for the church to create a peace-building department in Salt Lake City. We already have a clear commandment to proclaim peace. And the best place to start is where we are. I want to take you on a little journey into the Polynesian Cultural Center's journey, into the company culture. And I'll start briefly by, and of course I'm going to jump over a whole bunch of years, but the Cultural Center opened in 1963 as a living museum and quickly became the #1 attraction in Hawaii, still is to this day. You may be surprised to know that it took 21 years for a mission statement to be created. And you'd be thinking, well, they were successful from the beginning and they didn't need a mission statement, but how did they become so successful? Well, without having a mission statement, what the Cultural Center had were visions. Visions of David O. McKay. They had a dedicatory prayer by Hugh B. Brown. They pointed out what we were supposed to be. We were supposed to be a place where we would create leaders. We were supposed to be a place that if the whole world could see the nations of Polynesia and what we were about to share, then the world would have peace. That's what Hugh B. Brown blessed this place to be. After 10 years later, cultural beliefs were put in place. In 2013, Alfred Grace became the CEO. Significance of Alfred Grace is that he was the first president to come from within. All our presidents prior to him and CEOs had been appointed mainly from Salt Lake City, from Utah. Alfred was the first to come and work here as a student and work through different departments and then become the CEO. We all wanted him to succeed, and he has. We're all very proud of him. Almost 10 years ago when he was made the CEO, a couple of years after he was made the CEO, there was a purpose statement put together and it was led by Chad. Chad led a discussion in the boardroom, in our old boardroom with a handful of leaders to put together what is the purpose of the Polynesian Cultural Center. I was fortunate to be in that meeting and I'm grateful to see the minds turning and the hearts being knitted together, woven together to come up with 4 words. One ohana, sharing aloha, is the purpose of this special place. One group, one family sharing aloha. Now, you've probably heard aloha 200 times since you got here if you're visiting. It is a greeting word, it is a farewell, and it does mean love, pure love. But we adopted at the Cultural Center a definition given to us by 2 kumahula, 2 cultural specialists, Keith Awai and Cy Bridges. They taught us that alo means in the presence of, and the presence we're speaking about is the presence of deity, because in the presence of deity, man received ha, the breath of life. So when we say aloha at the Polynesian Cultural Center, we want people to feel aloha. What does it mean? I am literally making a commitment to you when I say aloha. I am saying to you, how can I bless your life? How do I help you in your life's journey? How can I, through your interaction with me, bring you back into the presence of deity, of ha? A scholar in New Zealand named Timothy Karatu, probably the most prolific language specialist in our culture, said that language is the key to understanding. Therefore, if you want to understand a culture, learn language. Good place to start is with proverbial statements. I'm going to come back to that. But what ended up happening in 2015, I met with Alfred Grace. This had a real flash animation yesterday, but sorry, it's gone. I asked him, what would you like me to do? I'd just been hired in HR as the Director of Talent Management. I have no HR qualifications. I have no HR background. But he asked me to meet with him, and I asked him, what do you want me to do? He said, we have too many kingdoms. In other words, there's a conflict happening in the Cultural Center. You see, facilities are focusing on trades and building skills in their employees. Restaurant services are bringing in keynote speakers every month and learning different skills from different companies and organizations. The guest services are focusing on their tours and cultural content. In the islands, we had already started using the principles of Arbinger. Sales and marketing, we're holding on to ideas from 7 Habits and Franklin Covey. Human resources, we're just trying to survive. Finances, we're doing nothing. No. Finances, we were focusing on other things, especially making sure we were staying afloat. And the theatre and other cultural presentations, we're using cultural content to use that for employee development. He said, align us. Take us back to our purpose. There is, I'm not sure what's happening with my clicker, Sydney, but take those minutes off. So from the purpose statement, we put together the Ohana training, a small group of people, Chad Ford, David Whippy, myself, Kim Makako, and a handful of brilliant field directors from the International Cultural Peacebuilding Major and David O'Mackay Center. We put together an Ohana training, 6 modules. Took us 6 months, maybe 9. From that came a new company orientation, a new handbook, and I could go on of all the different things that it became. It became rating your supervisor. Our evaluations changed. And there is a quote I want to share with you from a book named BE 2.0 by Jim Collins. He said, consider any great organization, one that has lasted over the years. Sorry, putting on my HR head here. And I think you will find that it owes its resilience to a power of what it calls beliefs and the appeal these beliefs have to its people. So we took these beliefs and we put them into values, you could say, that already existed in Polynesia. Okay, Sydney, what's happening? Another quote from Jim Collins and William Lazier. Human beings respond to values, ideals, dreams, and exhilarating challenges. It's our nature. We will go to phenomenal lengths in an effort to live up to the ideal of an organization, peers, group, or society if we share those ideals and consider them worthy. I love that quote at the end of this because I remember sitting in my first workshop with Chad right here in this meeting house. And he told us a funny story of no matter where he's traveled in the world, whether he's talking to Palestinians, to those who are Arabic, to speaking to Christians, Muslims, Jewish people, there was a common denominator out of every meeting and gathering. The people would say to Chad, this is our culture. This is what it is to be Muslim. This is what it is to be Jewish. And why I laughed at that, because I was sitting there thinking, this is Maori. This is Polynesian culture. And there were these ideals that I knew we owned. And they belong in all cultures. In every culture, there are principles of peace building. There are principles of success. Our PCC Ohana training, the first thing we did was we defined culture. And the culture that's still taught to this day in PCC orientation is it's the lens through which we see the world. It's the lens through which we see and understand each other. Now, we understand this lens we're talking about isn't just with our eyes, but what the Hawaiian people call na'au, with our soul. We understand that every conversation, every handshake, every glance we give people, these behaviors are impacted by how you see the person. So we started putting together 6 trainings. They all had principles that come from Polynesia. You've already learned from Isaiah yesterday about what laie is, and so we asked them, we challenged the company, how do we see laie? And if you see it as a wahi kapu, a sacred place, sacred space, as a pu'uhonoa, a place of refuge, what's the appropriate behavior? Would we yell at people? Would we belittle somebody? Would we use them as tools? Would we ignore them as irrelevancies? Or do you see people who are escaping, just as the ancients did? People escape to laie today. They don't think they're escaping, but they are. They're escaping their mortgages. They're escaping their bosses. They're escaping their lives, their reality. If you see them as these people who have these aspirations, goals, but also are facing challenges like we are, how then would we look after them? How then would we see them and treat them? As you go through each of these values or these trainings, there are values of ifonga, like you learned yesterday. That's in Si Ohana. In PCC is the value of malama, to cherish people, cherish them. What does that look like? In Seeing Prophets, we learned about Tauhi Va. The Tongan people have this value for over thousands of years of nurturing the space between each other, as we learned from Dr. Kaili. We got to see Aloha, and President Grace said, Seamus, you're missing one. I said, what is it? He said, see BYU-Hawaii. How do we see that as the cultural center? And we had just come through I'll use the word rough, transition from one leadership to the next. And so we taught, what does it mean? Is it us versus them? Is it self-preservation or us-preservation? Was taught in CBYU, and lastly, C-Mana was our leadership development. So today, I work at doTerra. It's where I am. I have in me ideas of peace building. I was shown here the 6 cultural beliefs, core values of doTerra when I started there last August. Take ownership, earn trust, use good judgment, constantly improve, have an outward mindset. I like that one. Be customer obsessed. I asked the Vice President, are you open to change? He said, why? And I said, because I think these are behaviors. Can we focus on mindset? How we see people. Every value should link back to seeing people as people. He said, sure, show me what you would do. So here I am from the Maori village at a $3 billion company asking what can I do to help? Take ownership became be the legacy. Earn trust became be pure. I remember one of the vice presidents saying to me, Seamus, make sure they're not too churchy. I said, what do you mean too churchy? He said, that sounds like Gordon B. Hinckley. I said, he didn't say be pure, he said be clean. But then I also said, what's wrong with being churchy? You made $3 billion last year. He said, we get criticized and we get critiqued all the time for being a Mormon company. And I asked him again, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to be blessed. We talked about being pure, and I said to him, he said, how are you going to teach that? I said, well, there's an oil called arbor vitae. And for the native people, that's the tree of life here in the United States of America. It's used to purify bad feelings. It's used for smudging in buildings to take away contention, bad spirits. We're going to use the oils to teach us. We're going to use wintergreen, where the people of Nepal greet you with namaste, which literally means, I see God in you. And all the oils that the company has have values that belong to a people that surround peace building. Be empowering, be curious, be leader focused, and be customer obsessed. Why be? Because being is often a lot harder than doing, because it starts with inside. I'm going to skip over all of this because I just got the 1 minute mark. I apologize, but all through the cultures of Polynesia, there are values, there are proverbs that teach us from the language, the mindset of the people. But I'm just going to get to one. Sorry, Dr. Kahili. Our people weren't just warriors, but we were men who honored females as well. The Tongan people remind us of that. There is a saying that we've heard a lot here, and I'll end with this. Our people were peacemakers in the Pacific. These proverbial statements remind us of that. The bottom one, should you take the tender shoots of the flax bush, it will die, and therefore where will the bellbird live? And if you were to ask me what's the most important thing in the world, it's people. It's people. It's people. So I go back to our quote. The best place to start is where we are. And your people, my people, we're peace builders. If we can help the world see that, share that, then we know that we're making the world a better place. It's appropriate in my culture. I sing a song, but I can't sing. So if I can get this to work, you might need to change the battery, Sid. Hutia te rito mo te hara ke kei hea te ko mako e ko ki mai ki ahau he aha te mea nui te mea nui tēnei au. Maku e ki atu kia koe he tangata, he tangata. Maku e ki atu kia koe he tangata, he tangata. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Alrighty then. Thank you to all you beautiful souls who are here. I want to begin by giving honor to those who welcomed and host us here today, to those ancestors and spirits who inhabit this place and who we brought with us, to the craftsmen and women who created this beautiful place for us to learn peace. As Peter said to our Lord, Lord, it is good for us to be here. It's pleasant to talk of peace, as we have the past 2 days, and as we will this morning. But I think it's important to take a moment to remember those who suffer from its absence. The women, children, and men of Ukraine, millions of whom have been driven from their homes, and the tens of thousands of whom have been killed, sometimes in horrific fashion. This is in addition to the 4 other ongoing wars that have claimed at least 10,000 direct violent deaths in the past year around the world, in Afghanistan, Yemen, Myanmar, and Ethiopia, and the 38 other armed conflicts that rage around the world. The victims and their families of the senseless rash of mass shootings in this country, most notably in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. While we've been meeting here this week in this place of refuge, 4 people were killed in a mass shooting in Portsmouth, Virginia, and 3 others in another shooting in Smithsburg, Maryland. In the roughly 1 minute I've been talking, an average of 24 people in this country will have been victimized by rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. This equals 12 million women and men each year. So let us pray for all these victims of violence and the countless others I've not named. As we sit here in this peaceful place, my heart's heavy. I don't know this, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I think there's a very real chance that we may see an outbreak of serious violence in the United States later this month. If indeed the Supreme Court issues a ruling about abortion rights, like what we saw in the leaked draft, I expect that frustrated, outraged elements of the political left will take to the streets and violence will ensue. That may well spark counter-violence from the political right, where certain extreme elements have been normalizing the concept of violence as a political tool for several years. I hope I'm wrong. But we may be in for a long, hot summer that could equal or exceed that which we saw after the murder of George Floyd 2 years ago. This, sisters and brothers, is why this conversation is so necessary. This is why Jesus came into the world. This is why Jesus called us to be peacemakers, to help us heal a fallen, broken, violent world. According to restoration theology, humanity's original sin was not eating a piece of fruit. That was a foreordained and courageous act by Mother Eve that helped progress God's plan of salvation. No, our first sin, which truly alienated humans from one another and from God, was when brother killed brother. Several generations later, as violence proceeded unabated, the prophet Enoch saw a vision of God in all creation. In the midst of this epiphany, Enoch witnessed God weeping. How could this be? How could the Lord of all creation weep? God answered, "Unto thy brethren have I said, and also give commandment that they should love one another, and that they should choose me, their father. But behold, they are without affection, and they hate their own blood." They are without affection, and they hate their own blood. We're promised that at some future day, God will wipe away all our tears. But for now, our tears of sorrow, frustration, hurt, loss, and trauma flow into a mighty river of grief, joined by God's own tears. As President Spencer W. Kimball lamented, we are a warlike people, easily distracted from our assignment of preparing for the coming of the Lord. When enemies rise up, we commit vast resources to the fabrication of gods of stone and steel, ships, planes, missiles, fortifications, and depend on them for protection and deliverance. When threatened, we become anti-enemy instead of pro-kingdom of God. Our weeping parents are calling their children back from the precipice. God has given us in these latter days the Book of Mormon, with not one but two reminders that violence begets violence, and unchecked, it leads to civilizational holocaust. Give thanks unto God, the last Nephite prophetically wrote, that he has made manifest unto you our imperfections, that ye may learn to be more wise than we have been. Today we'll hear from a number of practitioners of peace who are wiser than the Nephites were. David and I wrote a book. That's important. Ideas matter. But our goal all along was to inspire readers not just to think, but to go and do. Jesus didn't say, "Blessed are the peace believers or the peace thinkers." It is the peacemakers who reveal what it means to be a child of God. If Proclaim Peace accomplishes one thing, we want it to be this: to convince Latter-day Saints that peace building is their inheritance, obligation, and privilege. At the outset of World War I, the deadliest conflict the world had ever known to that point, President Iosepa taught, "For years it has been held that peace comes only by preparation for war, but peace comes only by preparing for peace." We love all the swag that's been created for this conference, but Renounce War and Proclaim Peace is not just a slogan. The August 1833 revelation makes clear that this is an immutable covenant that God offers to us if we want to inherit his glory. For if you will not abide in my covenant, ye are not worthy of me. Proclaiming peace is part of the covenant path for all Christians. As we begin this final session, I pray that each of us goes forth from this conference with the spirit of peace burning deep in our hearts, with a desire and commitment to live up to our covenantal obligation to be peacemakers. We're about to hear concrete examples of what that looks like. May we each take that inspiration and then let the Spirit guide us how and where to go next. Thank you.
I love to hear Patrick speak, and you can see why this has been a rich 10 years. Maybe that's why it took 10 years. I just wanted to drag out this association as long as possible. It is a really sacred honor to be in this place of refuge and to feel that sense of refuge, and to be in this house amongst the ancestors. I've always envied those who have the gift of feeling the presence of the ancestors. That has not been my gift. But events over the last several weeks, there have been 2 moments where I have felt the ancestors. That gift has come. And one of them is today. And I know they are here, and I know that we cannot build peace without them. 40 years ago this week, I was off the mainland for the first time, here in Hawaii for the first time, here at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And the spirit that I felt here was extraordinary. As a 14-year-old kid, turning 15 that week, it was a wonderful introduction to a world that I have only come to appreciate how vast and beautiful it is. 3 years ago, I had an opportunity to return. The first time since I had been here as a 14-year-old to teach at BYU-Hawaii for a semester. I was a visiting professor, but I was really here to learn. A couple of things happened that were really special to me. One was an opportunity to share a draft of the book with the students and to get their feedback. And this book is an infinitely better book because of what they shared in that classroom. So I was here to learn how to write a better book. I was also here to learn how to be a peacemaker, a peace builder. I had the great privilege of sitting in on Chad Ford's class in Intercultural Peacebuilding 121, the introductory course. But the course that challenged me more than anything was David Whippy's class on mediation, where for the first time I was learning how hard it is to move from talking about principles to trying to actually implement principles of peace. Since then, I have been trying to learn to be a better peace builder. And for the last 3 years, I've been volunteering as a mediator in the court system and at BYU, Idaho's housing office. And I have learned how bad of a peace builder I am, as has been shared often. But I'm learning. And so what I am looking forward to now is learning from those who have such vast experience in peace building and in the hard work of taking principles and putting them into practice in real life situations. I know that the ancestors are here today, but I also know they have been with those who have built peace and are ultimately integral to any future of peace that we might be able to build. And so you've heard plenty from Patrick and I. I am eager and excited to turn the stage to those who have been in the trenches and know how to do this work, and who can teach us how to do that work. Thank you.
Nisa Yandra Vinaka and Bula. At the outset, I wish to recognize and pay my respects to the indigenous peoples of Hawaii as the traditional custodians of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between indigenous people and their traditional territories. Today, I feel extremely blessed with a huge sense of gratitude and appreciation to be able to be here in a very special and sacred setting. I wish to thank Seamus and Kim and the Maori village team for the warm welcome and for inviting the spirit, but also acknowledging the spirit of our ancestors and the role that they play in our journey of peace building here on earth. So thank you for giving us an opportunity to add and share a special part of our peace building journey here in your intimate space. And I hope through my sharing, I do justice to this sacred setting. I also wish to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers and, of course, Patrick and David for all your hard work that's gone into the book. It has allowed me to read and reflect on the work of peace building we are involved in as an organization, and most importantly, I am involved in as a female LDS peace builder. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this special event. Now, peace building in Fiji with a diverse and context that I'd like to also acknowledge. I am of indigenous Fijian, meaning Itauke heritage, and I also have Indo-Fijian blood, or if I'm being politically correct, I am Fijian of Indian descent. I also have direct paternal links to an island called Rotuma, which also belongs to Fiji's jurisdiction. I was born and raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'd like to think that I'm still very young and have a lot more to learn in my journey of peace building. So currently, I'm also building my wealth of knowledge and experience in local peace building in Fiji through, of course, my learnings in spaces that I've had the privilege and the blessing to experience through not just my employment, but also my diversity. Now, the context in which I work in, back in Fiji, we gained independence back in 1970 from Great Britain. And since gaining independence, we have had a series of political instability. So we've had 4 coups, and these are illegal overthrows of elected government. 1987 was the first bloody coup, which they reference as one of the worst coups in the history of Fiji, and that was the year that I was born during a coup. So born into the church, but also born into conflict, or conflicting time. In 2000, we had a civilian coup. 2006, we had a military coup. And in 2009, our constitution was abrogated. So Fiji is rife with conflict. When I initially had seen the program and the concept behind this conference, I first asked myself the question, am I a peace builder? How exactly am I contributing to the work of peace in Fiji? And growing up, I've always imagined the work of peace building to look at, people mobilizing around violence or war and standing up against it. And it was a concept that the church was actively involved in, building peace, building wards. So in the earlier part of the book, there's a clear distinction made between negative peace and positive peace, and it allowed me to reflect on my work as a peace builder and contributing to positive peace. The Apostle Dallin H. Oakes is quoted in the book in saying, peace being more than just absence of war, but positive peace refers to a state of affairs in which justice, equity, and an abiding commitment to the common good is built into the very structure of society. Positive peace connotes harmony, wholeness, shared prosperity for all, and of course there is no peace without justice. Additionally, in the just war theory chapter, he goes on to teach that there are many individual church members who are actively working to reduce human suffering or to promote understanding amongst different peoples. Latter-day Saints around the world are engaged in interreligious dialogues, refugee resettlements, various forms of diplomacy, and sustainable development initiatives. So as I reflected on these bits, I said, okay, if we're going by President Oakes' definition, I believe I qualify as a peace builder in the work that I'm doing. I currently work and lead an organization called the Citizens Constitutional Forum. The organization was born out of a conflict, which is the 1987 illegal overthrow of our elected government. So the organization has been around for about 3 decades dealing with conflict, managing conflict. The vision of the organization is really to build a nation in which Fiji's people live together in equality, justice, and peace, respecting the law under a constitution that guarantees democracy and human rights. Our mandate is really human rights, advocacy, and education on Fiji's constitution, so all around Fiji. We look at areas of transparency, accountability, and good governance. Now, what this actually looks like on the ground is spending days in local communities and villages, and also informal settlements around Fiji, sitting on a floor and teaching citizens about the rights that they have in the Constitution. And this gives us the immense responsibility to then ensure that communities' priorities are then reflected and pushed into policy-making spaces. And it is such a hard job to work with structures that are so set in their minds and ways of doing things, but it can be rewarding. In yesterday's session, Sister Akano and Brother Whippy touched on the LDS culture and traditional culture. Now, when we teach the concept of human rights in Fiji, many communities deem it as a foreign concept. Foreign in the sense that it is almost entirely new and is deemed to, sort of award Fijians with almost a set of superpowers that they kind of were not aware of, that all of a sudden they have and can demand from those around them. And this is the feeling because we grew up in a very patriarchal society, and the environment that we grow up in does not teach you to question your elders, or they teach us to pay respect and listen to our elders, chiefs, and leaders. So questioning is not something that we're trained to do when we grow up. Then you have the concept of human rights, emphasizing, freedom of expression, opinion, and thought. So when we're teaching this in communities, we have to be really careful that we are not contributing to any misunderstandings. Yesterday, there was a discussion about whether or not church culture could be woven with traditional culture, and I do strongly believe that there are many synergies that can be harmonized, and they must not impose on each other, but rather embrace and acknowledge the context and the diversity that exists. Dr. Kaili on day one also touched on time. For us in the work of peace building in Fiji, context is an important aspect because it shapes our commitment, but also actions to the mandate of pushing for positive peace. Context really does shape our strategies of peace building. So when back 10 years ago in Fiji, you could get up and mobilize people to get together and stand up against, the low minimum rate. Today we need to get a permit. You can't be seen with 2 or more people, so we have to be working within a context. When entering local communities on the ground, we are very aware of cultural protocols, but also the manner in which local communities manage their conflict. Our strategy when engaging with communities is really to help enhance their capacities to manage conflict, conversation, and most importantly, relationships that need to be maintained. So it really is looking at what exists, how can we strengthen this. It does not disregard any locally generated and owned solutions that communities have been working hard to build and maintain over the years. Yesterday, Ben Cook spoke about sustainable peace and diplomacy in 2 tracks, which he identified track 1 as transactional and track 2 as attitudinal. Much of our work is bridging attitudinal change or local communities to transactionally or elected, the transaction track with elected representatives and leaders and policymakers. We educate and advocate over a period of time where we consistently provide direct support and mentor to build capacities of local communities to be able to engage with policymakers. Genuine relationships, over the years, we have learned just how important building relationships with local communities and stakeholders are. Genuine relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and understanding. Our organization in Fiji, unfortunately, is seen as the watchdog of government. So you can imagine trying to manage and keep a relationship with the state. While we can do and provide support to policymakers, for example, provide human rights lenses when they're making laws, we strain this relationship if we speak on other issues that the state may be falling short in. And I like what the book states in the chapter, A Political Theology of Friendship, which says, while living in anticipation of Christ's eventual millennial kingdom, we can still offer our current political communities, from the local to the national and even global level, true friendship and all that it entails: mutual interest, genuine care, commitment, sacrifice, hope, and yes, love. And at the same time, deep friendship includes a willingness and even a responsibility to call out bad behavior. Friendship is not blind allegiance. It adds a restoration text that articulates the notion of being subject to the state and offers an alternative political theology of friendship where such friendships does not require the follower of Jesus to condone or participate in states' violence. I have been able to reflect on peace building in our line of work, which is really about managing relationships both with local communities in Fiji and the state for the collective good. I must admit, the operational part of managing these relationships require patience, understanding, humility, Christ-like love, all of which I can credit to my upbringing in the church, because the job really does not teach you that, but rather it throws you in the deep end and you either sink or swim. I was fortunate and blessed to have gone through BYU-Hawaii and today be a living testament of the vision of the school, which is to prepare students of Oceania and the Asian Rim to be long life disciples of Jesus Christ and leaders in their families, communities, chosen fields, and in building the kingdom of God further. And also the vision of BYU in preparing men and women with intercultural and leadership skills necessary to promote world peace and international brotherhood, to address world problems, and to be a righteous influence in families, professions, civic responsibility, social affiliations, and in the church. The experience here at BYU, along with the spirit and my diverse upbringing, culture, and being born in the church, has molded me into the young leader I am today, with so much more potential in the area of peace building in Fiji. This is a testament that there is space to merge and weave cultural and tradition, if done carefully with patience, understanding, and Christ-like love. I will end here, and I believe we can engage in question and answer later. Vinaka.
Aloha everyone, and kia ora. I was asking Seamus yesterday what a proper greeting would be, and he shared with me tēnā koutou. which is a greeting of I see you and I acknowledge you. And we mean that to this special place, to all of you, to Matua Kiem for us being able to use this space. This space means a lot to me, as does BYU-Hawaii. I was privileged to spend a lot of time in this village with Chad, teaching Arbinger to Seamus and to Kim, and I learned so much here. Gets me emotional being here. The principles that I learned here from Kim and the others will stick with me forever. So I'm just blessed and grateful to be here. My name's Chris Pineda. These are wonderful colleagues and fellow alumni of mine, Kasha and TK. And we're excited to share with you a little bit about what we're doing in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to talk to you a little bit about groundwork today. Something that we all have in common is we all graduated, obviously, from this wonderful institution. But beyond that, we have a shared vision, and it's President McKay's vision. To be an influence for good and spread peace throughout the world is deeply, deeply in our hearts. And it's one of the great blessings of my life to be able to do this work with people sitting behind me that share that vision. If I could, I'd take every single alumni and field director in this room with me. It's a great privilege and blessing to do this work with people that have that vision. It's amazing. Salem, Oregon is where we're at. And a little bit about Salem before we'll show you a video about a little bit with what we do. It's the capital of Oregon. And there's political divides, there's racial divides, there's homelessness, there's poverty, there's all sorts of challenges that are there. And we've tried many attempts to engage in that. Been successful, been unsuccessful, but what we've been doing the last few years is something we call groundwork. And this is a little bit about groundwork. You want to play it?
We're constantly trying to engage in the community, what can we do action-wise, initiative-wise to help and support our community. And so we got this conversation of what would it be like to have a leadership institute in our community. What would that look like? What would it need to be? What should it become?
The framework is actually called as the Rooted Leadership Framework, and it's built on this analogy of soil, seeds, and weeds.
We took that framework, we made it a language that we could use and disperse that would be understandable across the board. We want leaders from all backgrounds to join, all industries to join.
Seasoned leaders, people in executive C-suite roles, we have people that are middle managers, we have individuals that are not in leadership positions. So what I think is really unique about this is that it allows people to discover their leadership capacity. It allows them to define their leadership style and leadership traits. And most importantly, it allows people to share their leadership with others. And I find that to be truly, truly unique.
But when we're talking about soil, we're talking about people, manifestations of it.
The soil part is what we always come back to. If you have good, healthy soil that includes people that see each other, recognize the humanity in each other.
They're a human being with needs, fears, inadequacies, you name it, just like us. If you think of a wagon wheel, somebody spokes to it, there's a lot of spokes missing in our community when it comes to leadership. And so how do you provide that? How do you fill the gap? And so if we can provide a simple framework like the Rooted Leadership Framework, mixed with the language and the camaraderie that these people can share, our hope is that they can figure out problems that have yet to be solved.
All right, that other gentleman in the video is Salam. He was actually going to come with us, another colleague of ours. He's an amazing individual. As you see in the video, we've made big strides in becoming very intentional and formal in our efforts to peace build. And the way we have a vision, our vision statement is to be a catalyst for transformational change. And we don't believe that we are the transformational change. We just feel that we can do a good job at creating conditions for that change in our community. And this is how we define transformation. This is how we define transformational change, a fundamental shift towards positive potential that includes how we see, think, and behave differently. And everything that we do, decisions that we make, everything we offer to our community and these leaders we work with is encouraging them towards this positive potential and how they think, behave, and see differently. And a key element of that is the rooted framework, which TK is gonna share a little bit more about.
Not quite as tall as Chris. So yeah, we wanted to share with you a little bit of what we actually teach both leaders in our institute, but really anybody in the community that wants to come and learn about this. And this is our framework around how leaders can be a force for transformational change in their communities. So you'll see as we go through this, I should also mention, you heard in the video, we called this the rooted framework, and we use an analogy of soil, seeds, and weeds, kind of an agricultural metaphor, both to help leaders kind of see how all these pieces fit together into one whole, but even more so to create a common language for them as they come together to learn about this, both to understand community organizational problems, but also so that they can then collaborate together better on them through that common language. So we're going to go through with you just what we call the master diagram again of our rooted framework. It goes over the 4 main elements that we go. So first you can see up here, we already started on it, we have outcomes. Every organization has outcomes. It's the goals, it's the mission, the vision that they have, and we help leaders identify what their purpose, their organizational goals are in the beginning. And so in our analogy of soil, seeds, and weeds, we call this the fruit. It's the fruit of our labors where we're ultimately trying to create the impacts. So you might think, as I'm explaining this all to you and we're going through this, you might want to also think about how does this apply to your own organization, your own work, what you're doing. It doesn't have to be peace building, but what are the outcomes that you're striving for? And we might even think in the context of this conference, you could think about this in your ward, with just ward theory. What are the outcomes that you're trying to strive for in your ward? So anyway, so we have outcomes, which are our fruit. And then we say, in order to produce those outcomes, we often just have ideas, a theory of change. If we do X, it will produce Y. Some idea around what we could do, some program or project that we can implement to produce that fruit or outcome. And so we call that the seeds. We plant the seed in the ground, it grows into a tree, which then produces the fruit that we ultimately hope to harvest. So you can think again, what are the seeds? What are the programs, the projects, the ideas that you have that you're implementing to try to produce those outcomes? Alongside our seeds, we have conflict. Obviously, in peace building, we talk a lot about conflict. We specifically are talking about inter-organizational conflict. For most people, this is an inhibiting force. This gets in the way of producing our fruit. It takes time, energy, resources away from our seeds and makes it more difficult to produce that fruit. And so we try to help leaders understand how to transform that. In the context of this, we call conflict weeds, because we ultimately, we're trying to weed them out, remove them from the ground. Beneath all of this, we have people. We learned today people are the most important thing. People give meaning and underlie everything that we do. People come up with ideas. They implement the programs. People are the ones who engage in conflict. And oftentimes, especially in peace building, our fruits even are oriented around people. And so we call people, or in our analogy, we relate to people as the soil, because everything we do is rooted into the soil. And we'll talk a little bit, Chris will talk a little bit more in a second. We talk about healthy soil versus toxic soil. You heard a little bit in the video. Chris will talk a little bit more about and show you some images of that in an organizational setting. So that's kind of what we call the master framework. We teach leaders each of these 4 elements. We spend hours on each of them, teaching them tools, strategies around how they can implement these things in their own organizations, but even more largely speaking in their communities. Alongside it, so this is kind of just organizational. You just organize your work. What are my outcomes? What am I working towards? What are the programs, projects, ideas I have that are working towards that? What conflicts might be getting in the way? Who are the people who are involved? That's just how we organize our work. We go along with this and say there's 2 ways we can approach this framework. And so the first one of those ways we call being surface-minded, which we define as just going through the motions. We've probably all experienced this in some aspect of our life, if not work, where when we're engaging with the seeds, the programs, projects, we're just going through the motions, doing what the bare minimum to maintain the maintenance of it. When we're with weeds, we talk a little bit more about conflict avoidance and conflict management, how we just, we don't want to deal with the weeds, the conflict, if we don't have to, but if we need to, we'll just deal with that surface layer. We'll chop it off at the stem so it looks nice. And we contrast being surface-minded, which we also think about a lot as being transactional. We just deal transactionally with these different elements. We contrast surface-minded with being deep-minded, which we define as being purpose-driven, and as opposed to transactional, being transformational. You can see soil reappears. When we're deep-minded and purpose-driven, people are often our purpose. And so we're deeply mindful of other people. We're accountable for our impacts on them, but we also see deeply ourselves and our own personal sense of purpose. We deeply see and are deeply minded about our projects. What is the ultimate purpose? Why are we doing them? So that we can best produce those impacts. And then we're also deep-minded about our weeds, and we try to see the potential in those conflicts so that we can transform them. And ultimately, we in this framework, we believe that as leaders strive to be deep-minded and apply this framework, they can be forces for transformational change, both in their organization, but also in their community.
Thanks, TK. We have over 18 hours worth of curriculum, and TK gave you the 3-minute version. So I want to just emphasize, we had to pick a niche. What's our niche in our community? Where are we going to enter? Where are we going to do this work? And I think this framework is a peace-building framework that can be used in many different settings. We've chosen to work with leaders because leaders have decision-making capability. They create structures, they create systems, they have power, and they have influence. And we want to leverage that to make a difference in our community. Specifically, we start with executive-level, director-level leaders of all different sectors. So here's an idea of the sectors that we work with, at least how we what we call them: the business community, faith community, education, government, nonprofit, and even with the general public. And over here on the right, you see toxic. I would say that this is an example of what a toxic community looks like. In some communities throughout the world, people literally go to war and kill each other, right? In our community, it ends up being very transactional, political warfare, ideological warfare, right? But it becomes toxic, and at the very least, it's transactional. And our goal is to create a transformational community where healthy interactions are happening all over in different sectors. And it's amazing what's happened already. It's just been a few years, but amazing things have happened and are happening. And Kasha is going to share a little bit about what that has looked like and what it looks like today.
All right, I got to talk about the coolest part, which is what we actually do. And so, like Chris mentioned, with our community members, we really try to grab a diverse group of leaders. This means different backgrounds, different diversity. Just to give you an example, some people have been in our cohorts. This year we have like a county commissioner. We've also had the chief police of Kaiser, which is a neighboring town. We've had assistants to the superintendent of the school district. We've had high school teachers, executive leaders of nonprofits. We even last year had a monk, a Catholic monk, who ran on energy drinks, and it was super fun. And people like me, right, who are still new. We have leaders who have years of experience, and also leaders who are just starting. And once we kind of gather all of these leaders together, we start off the year with a 3-day retreat where we introduce them to the framework, to soil, seeds, and weeds, have them apply it to their organizations. We also have them really build relationships with each other. A lot of times, this is the first time these leaders are in the same room with each other, and we even have leaders that are on opposite ends of political arguments, opposite ends of community issues. It's the first time they're in this room together, and we really try to be intentional about creating space for them to learn and engage with others. And after our retreat, we then spend an entire year. We have monthly sessions where we spend all day together. Again, we start those days building relationships. We really want our leaders to not just see each other as these objects or tools of how can you help me get what I want in the community, but really, who are you? What's hard? What is hard at work? What is hard at home, right? We really want our leaders to see each other. So we start with building relationships. We will have them engage with, we'll have our alumni come back and sit on panels. We invite well-known leaders like Chad Ford to come and present to them. And we also have them work on community problems of practice. So we identify different community problems. And this year our cohort is working on mental health, city livability, homelessness, and workforce readiness, right? And we have them apply the framework to those problems, and they engage in it that way. And we also, outside of those cohorts, we have them meet with mentors. So every year they're meeting with an alumni and helping them connect it to their organization, as well as do personal growth plans. So they're being very intentional about their growth. And so that's kind of our year, and it's all really exciting, but the most exciting part is kind of what happens after people graduate from our cohort. That space that was created and those relationships that were built really inspire our leaders to go off and do great things. We've had a group of our cohort members start an alliance to eradicate children and family homelessness. We've had a leader that was inspired to start an initiative that helps young people have healthier relationships with their phones. We have a high school teacher that started a class to teach teenagers how to see people as people. It's just been really, really amazing to see all of the work and effort that has been done in our community. And that's what we feel is really creating the conditions for transformational change, is our people.
Thanks, Kasha. Kasha also has a hard task of explaining all the amazing things that have happened in just a couple of minutes. If you want to learn more, you can scan this QR code. It takes you straight to our website. There's a lot more information. We have a podcast with 60 plus episodes, thousands of downloads. Seamus has been a guest on there. Chad's been a guest on there a few times, and it's been amazing. A couple messages I just wanted to leave with all of you. One is for the students and faculty here at the school. I encourage you to think about President McKay's vision and something Chad told me a long time ago. Don't see yourself as a type or version of person that he saw. See yourself as the person that he saw, that would go out into the world and be genuine gold and make a difference. That's made a difference in my life. It's guided every decision that I've made, and it's not always been easy. But it's one of the most important things that I think you can do, being a part of this wonderful institution. And for everybody else, practitioners and guests that we have, and then even students, we're able to do this because of a wonderful philanthropist that writes the bill, and somebody that we shared McKay's vision with and that he fell in love with. And he has a saying, being somebody that gives so much, that goes like this: it's, you make a life by what you get. You make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And if all of us can go back out into the world to continue to give to this quest of peace, to proclaim peace, the world's going to continue to be a better and better and better place. With that, I share again, as Seamus shared with me, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mahalo.
Good morning and aloha. My name is Adrian and I'm from Hong Kong. First of all, I feel very welcome here. Especially I'm grateful for David and Patrick for putting the book together, because it's very rare for an Asian student come back and to present. And I'm also grateful to see all my professors from my peacebuilding program, Chad, David, Amanda, Seamus, and they're all wonderful people, and they taught me who I really am. I graduated with a peacebuilding degree, and 3 years ago in 2019. Oh, before I continue, you can look at the screen instead of my face because I have a lot of great pictures. So I graduated with my wife 3 years ago. She's in a different major, and I'm glad my parents was there to witness that. I also want to introduce my parents, Jimmy and Joe. Although they're not physically here with us today, I see them as the true peace builder. In my last semester of a peacebuilding course, my final project is about the 2019 Hong Kong movement. And the poster here, the picture, was taken when 2 million Hong Kong people were protesting on the street. And this is fascinating. The movement got really intense between the civilian, the government, and the police. It's affected everyone in Hong Kong. There are conflicts everywhere, on the street, home, workplace, school, social media, in the church, even in the BYU-Hawaii campus. So I decided to open up a workshop for people to have conversation and share their opinion. So there were about 30, I would say 25 to 30 people, students, to join my workshop. The meeting eventually lasts for about 2.5 hours until the custodian kicked us out. I treasure this opportunity. As Patrick and David mentioned in the past 2 days, we all have different ways to proclaim and spread peace. Writing books, just like that. Teaching in school, giving out a workshop, taking care of people who are in need. For me, this is facilitating and training to create inner peace among individuals. I'm a strong believer of inner peace. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King, "Peace is not when the summer sky is clear and the sunshine in scintillating beauty. The peace of which Paul spoke is the calmness of soul amid terrors of trouble, inner tranquility amid the howl and rage of outer storm, the serene peace at the center of a hurricane amid the howling and jostling winds." Again, I'm a strong believer of inner peace. As David and Patrick talks about the importance of personal peace, it is not that easy to achieve world peace. We need to create inner peace and to family peace. From family peace to community peace. From community peace to country peace. And finally, that we can achieve world peace. After I graduated, I went to Singapore to get certified as an Arbinger facilitator. And we learned a lot about corporate training. And I did a lot of Arbinger training with my family members, even though some of them, they refused to sit down for 5 hours with me. Oh, I forgot to mention, today I have my sister over here. You can find someone that's holding a camera for 15 minutes. And she's a student over here, and she's taking a peacebuilding certificate. Well, I just peacefully recommend the certificate to her. I didn't force her. So Jimmy, my father especially, sensed the importance of conflict resolution in the current state of Hong Kong. Therefore, they started an organization called the Millennial Family Institute. The Chinese name over here, you probably won't see and you probably won't understand either, is called 齊家學院, which comes from a Chinese idiom, 修身齊家治國平天下. In translation, cultivate oneself, bring order to the family, govern the country, and bring peace to all. After we have a discussion with Chad and Amanda, sorry we didn't get your approval for that, but here they are. We started a project called Zero Contention. You may be familiar because President Nelson and Sister Wendy Nelson, they are a strong believer, or they are the one who suggests the zero contention. We use content from the Developing a Work Mindset and the book Dangerous Love from Chad to facilitate people from Hong Kong. Our objective is very direct and easy. Create harmony and peace among family. Hopefully in the future we can adapt Proclaim Peace in our training too, and we look forward to that. In the past 3 years, we focused on 3 areas: church, corporate, and community. You know, when I make this slide, I was like, that's pretty much everything, you know. So let me start with community. We had a lot of community work during these 3 years. We hold over 100 lectures in the community basis. So the very first service that we did, we call the International Family Day. And my parents introduced parenting, conflict resolution, and Alfred Adler's theories on how to form a family. I would love to share one story about a father. He worked in a higher position in the company, and he was folding his hand the entire the workshop. And when we're suggesting communication skills are very important with your family and with your coworker, and then he challenges. He said, well, sometime in a workplace, if someone is not efficient or productive, we will fire them. We'll not allow them. Well, we agree, and then we kindly address a question to him. Can you fire your son? Next, I want to introduce another NGO. It's called the SOCO, the Society of Community Organization. It's one of the biggest NGOs that help grassroots family in Hong Kong, and it's founded 50 years ago, with 6,000 grassroots family and over 1,000 single parents and over around 100 SEN family. We found that many parents or single parents from Hong Kong are incapable to play with their children. You may wonder, well, that's an easy task. I can play with my kid every day. But it's not like that back home. We believe playing is a big part of communication. Most people we work with are the grassroots in the society. They have lower education, lack of resources. So they come to SOCO and we provide different workshops to all of them. And this is the picture. My parents found a great bonding with the people over there, and at the same time, they found their purpose and vocation when they're helping this family. This is the CODA Hong Kong, the Children of Deaf Adults. So Jimmy and Joe has a few courses over the teaching about parenting and also with the deaf parents. One of the major challenges they face is that their children, which they're not deaf, they refuse to learn sign language. You know, that's a major concern, because if you don't learn sign language, well, you cannot really communicate with your parents. And without communication, or just simply having a chat, is really deep down, they cannot have a great relationship. Let me go faster. So these are the other workshop. Let's go to corporate. This is a lot of my work has been done in corporate. We have a different conflict resolution workshop with a lot of people, especially financial advisor team, insurance company, etc. And I'm using the principle and activity that I learned in this program to share with the people in Hong Kong. One great project that we work with is called the Salvis, one of the biggest real estate company in Hong Kong. We share about positive communication skills and how to transform conflict in the workplace. We continue to work with lots of corporate team. It's a very dynamic team. There's over 40 members in here, from 19 years old to 50 years old. So another great project has just happened actually last month. We have a chance to have a conflict resolution workshop with the Hong Kong airline. We focus on conflict resolution. They love the idea of collusion and dangerous love. And they have a lot of concerning questions concerning dispute with their clients and also their colleges. And lastly, church. We see a lot of opportunities in the church. This is a group of YSA from Provo, learning about outward mindset. And we also got invited by the state and self-reliant department and to teach about zero contention. We had around 3 bigger workshops last year. Not only non-member, also members needs to learn how to communicate with their family. And this is another project that we did last month. We're teaching family from mainland China. And this is the one to call Dissect a Family and Build Zero Contention. I want to extend a little bit with people that we work in China. The people we talk to in China has a very limited knowledge on maintaining relationship with their family. The parents' main focus is to make their kids study and get a good grade. The kids' goal is to impress their parents. When two didn't achieve their goals, conflict can easily occur. One reason is the oppression, in my opinion, is the oppression of family dialect. There are certain ways for us to respect our parents in Chinese culture. We don't really open up ourselves to our parents because most of the time we need to abide with what our parents want, and this is the culture. The relationship between parents and children is like boss and employee. Chinese people focus a lot on production. Building relationship takes time. Building peace is not productive to them, and they become an obstacle because it's not productive. Therefore, you can't find any proclaim peace or any peace workshop or conference in Hong Kong because they are just simply not productive. If we look at the map here, well, you can't really tell by the map, but Asia is the biggest continent. I just found out 2 days ago. It's the biggest continent in the world. The population is about equivalent to 60% of the world population. Chinese culture is just one culture. We still have many more Asian culture: Japanese, Korean, Indian, Philippines, Vietnamese, Thai, with so much more to bring peace to this country. Let me conclude my presentation with a story. I don't want to spoil with the peace building student here, but this is one of our last activity in 480. So one day, Chad told us to wear something casual, and I know something is gonna happen. So we went out to the classroom, and then we went to the field outside the library. You know, he showed us the difference between weeds and real grass, because they exactly look the same. And he told us you need to pull out the seed in order to get rid of the entire weed. And then he told us to try get one out, okay? I was like, okay, where's the tool? And he just looked at us. Also, okay, so we're using our hand. I went to the curb and find a shorter weed, you know, just try to get things done to impress my professor. So I carefully dig in with my hand inside the soil and start finding the seed. When I reached the first seed, I was like, well, this is easy. When I try to pull it out, there's another force on the other side of the seed. So I was like, okay, I continued to reach to the bottom. I found another seed. When I think it is all over, there at the third one. I remember yelling at Chad. You know, that's not happened a lot for Asian students. I yelling for Chad for calling for help. He just told me there are maybe more than one seed at a time. Remember to pull them all out, otherwise they would just grow more seed. Thank you, Chad. There's a Chinese saying, family shame must not be spread abroad. Chinese history and culture is very deep that people are afraid to talk about conflict. My wish is to hope we can overcome the culture and the fear. Be brave and persistent. Start with yourself and your family. May we pull out all the seed of the wheat. Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. Don't you just love these youth? Oh my gosh. From this school, sorry. Oh, I forgot about this. Okay, thank you. From this school, I'll tell you, will go men and women whose influence will be felt for good toward the establishment of peace internationally. The vision of David O. McKay, the vision of Dr. Chad Ford, our professor and friend and colleague. I am a byproduct of that vision. And I'm thankful to be here today, thankful for the opportunity to read a book that just energizes me and gives me hope, and to be amongst these youth that are absolutely phenomenal, and the faculty. my professors, Tavita and Chad. So I'll start from there. A new commandment I give unto you. Oh, I forgot about this thing, sorry. I'm not technical. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. I absolutely love that scripture, and it moves me to tears every time. But it is much easier said to read it than to actually do it. I was taught as a young girl by my parents and reminded of it at BYU-Hawaii and again at Eastern Mennonite University at the Center for Justice and Peacebuilding to pray. To pray not only for guidance, but to pray for the people that you work for. To pray to learn to love the people that you're working with. And that's not always easy when you're working with people who have slaughtered in every kind of horrendous way, who have raped and maimed. But I can tell you that the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the gospel of love, can teach us all to do that very thing. Now, I worked in Nigeria, and I'll just briefly talk about this so you can ask questions later. Nigeria is divided by 6 geopolitical zones. I worked in 5. And primarily, I worked in the Northeast, where Boko Haram crisis occurred, the Niger Delta, and the Middle Belt. But I want to talk about the Middle Belt specifically. So the Middle Belt deals with conflicts of religious, political, and ethnic divides, also farmer-herder and land disputes. But it's kind of like a woven mat, and they all interweave and affect each other. And you've seen that here in our own country, how a political divide turned into a religious divide. Sorry, I'm having to do both. So specifically, I want to talk about Plateau State and Riom local government, which is an LGA. And I worked on the farmer-herder crisis from 2013 to 2019, while I also worked on other crises throughout the country, but continued to work on this specific one. And the goal of the project that we worked on was building an architecture of peace. And the way that we did that is with this vision of teaching people to see humanity in each other, to honor dignity, how dignity violations lead to or can lead to violent conflict. Likewise, how honoring dignity helps to restore humanity. And then this idea of a higher love to approach conflict. And I can tell you today, as being a byproduct of BYU-Hawaii, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and also the Center for Justice and Peacebuilding, that these are theories that I learned in my upbringing and in this education. And so my boss gave me the ability to be able to try new things, and that's what I did. Our professor, Tavita, taught me in applied anthropology not to take the solution into the community, but rather go to the community and harvest a solution. And so the way that we did this was doing this. As I mentioned, we work with farmer herders, and right here is Riom. LGA is a tiny little LGA who has suffered astronomical violence and conflict, and in the worst possible ways. And the reason I am talking about this particular local government is because I met a man there who was like a father, like a brother, a true disciple of Jesus Christ, and I will tell his story in a little while. We worked on multi-track diplomacy, meaning right from the community, one-on-one community leaders, NGOs, all the way to the state and the federal government. We can't talk about Rio without talking about our beloved farmers. And so I love this picture. In Rio, we have 3 primary farmer tribes, and the tribe is Biram, Atin, Attacker. Biram and Attacker are friends. They work together. They have strong working relationships. The Atin, not as much, because they're stronger ties with the Fulani, but yet they're still bridge builders? Yes, sorry. So I want to stop here for just a second. Nigeria is the most populated country in the African continent. It has over 200 million people. It has nearly 300 ethnic groups and over 500 languages, including English, because it is a commonwealth. So you can see how complicated conflict can get. Then next we have here our Fulani herders that are nomads. The Fulani herders can either be nomads, semi-nomads, and nomad settlers. Nomads are the people that are coming in from Chad, from Sudan, Niger, Cameroon, and Nigeria, and they're grazing all over West Africa. The semi-nomads are those that live in the country, but they graze all over the country. And this is very important to note because they graze on farm lands. And then we have the settlers who have settled in Nigeria, who have been there for generations and generations. But because they're not indigents according to the state, not the Constitution, they don't have the same rights as the farmers have. Now, the farmer-herder conflict has left thousands of people dead. And hundreds of thousands of people displaced. Properties, homes, farms, animals destroyed. So how do you learn to love your enemy? Pride gets in the way. This idea, which we've been hearing throughout the conference, that you'll be viewed as weak. In a dialogue that we held, a Samoan dialogue process that I love, that I learned right here at BYU-Hawaii, with 30 people, they had over 500 loved ones killed in an attack. One man lost 18 family members. All his children, grandchildren, his wife, and his brother. So you can see how revenge plays a part in this, right? Reprisal attacks. They want a revenge for honor. They're so highly traumatized that the individual alone is not the only one traumatized, but you're dealing with whole groups that are traumatized, that are acting out either against self or simultaneously at others. So Proclaim Peace says this: among the most difficult, if not the most difficult of Jesus' teachings is his injunction to love your enemies. No command goes against the grain of the natural man or modern social training more sharply, making it both counterintuitive and countercultural. One of the hardest decisions you'll ever face in life is choosing whether to walk away or to try harder. We did much of our work through building relationships from the ground. From the ground up. Hang on a second. I got that message, and now I'm nervous. So working with women groups, bringing tribes that are warring together, tribes that were so afraid to meet, they thought that they would be ambushed, but they had the courage to do it. Community leaders that we taught to that we worked with one-on-one. These are our many dialogues that we did to go back and teach families to change this culture of violence because people had been born into it, the youth. Traditional rulers, this is a picture of me with all of the traditional rulers of the tribes that I mentioned. These are the traditional rulers and religious leaders of the Fulani tribes that they told us we would never be able to work with, that they would never accept us. And here I'm doing some work with them on trauma, and anyway, you can see they accepted us. We taught them that a leader that leads with love has the power to transform a nation, and that you don't have to be called as a leader or have a title as a leader to be a leader. You just have to love your people. Community leaders that we trained, love is essential to leadership. We couldn't stop at the community, so we trained the entire House of Assembly. We held dialogues with them because we had to have policy change because of structural violence. Sorry, I don't have my glasses. Rather than feeding the fire of violence, we need to extinguish it. In the midst of active violence, we need to find ways to secure a negative peace so that we can work toward positive love. Active, assertive, even confrontational love. Love is the powerful agent that extinguishes rather than flames of human violence. Now, I hadn't read that book, and I didn't even know the authors, but I guess we come from the same gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's what we taught. Lema, who we heard about yesterday. Leadership is standing with your people. People say you have to live to fight another day, but sometimes you have to show you are a true leader. Now, I have a very short time to tell this story, so look at the pictures, and I'll try to tell it quickly. After 7 years of hard work, at this point, I think it was 6, the farmers and the herders are together here in dialogue, in friendship, and taking care of each other. We had a crisis in 2018 that in the period of 3 days, we lost almost 500 people. None of the people from our villages that we worked in died because the leaders that you saw, they were doing their peace work. However, I went to an imam, the disciple of Jesus Christ that I absolutely loved, and I took him by the hand, which you're not supposed to do, but he's kind of like a dad to me, or was. And I said, Imam, promise me that you'll never stop preaching peace. We need leaders like you. 3 weeks later, he was preaching peace in the mosque after prayer, and he was assassinated for preaching peace. So we decided to go to his village and pay a condolence trip. So here we are, Atin, Fulani, and Biram, and myself, a foreigner. And the road was so long and so far that we had to trek. 3 months before we made this, or 2 months, I forget, 8 people had died on that very road. So my colleague said, Emma, they're going to kill us out here. I said, if not, the tribes are our boss for being out here and not letting them know that we came out here. So you can see how far we trekked. And when we arrived, there was a small little room. And leaders had come from the Fulani tribe, from the neighboring villages, and these were the top of the top, including their religious leaders, and including the imam's son, who's wearing white. This is a place where women never enter. This is a village where no Biram, attacker, or Atin tribe man or woman had ever entered, let alone a foreigner. So I addressed them. And I said to them, I'm not here on a peace building tour or visit. I'm here to pay you condolence. I'm here because we loved the imam because as a Christian woman, he's one of the best Christian I've ever met, and he was an imam. And it's my fault that he's dead, because I made him promise me to preach peace, and he did, and he was killed. And I'm so discouraged that I just want to walk away from this idea of peace building. And the congregation started to speak in a nutshell. And the leader of the group stood up and he said, "We will put down our weapons. Every leader in this room will go back to our villages, and we will tell our people not to take up arms. That the imam did not die in vain. And whatever tenant taught you to love so deeply that you would walk into a village where you could be assassinated is the kind of love that we want to be known for." And then they prayed for us. "But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." Matthew, the Quran. "Never will you attain the good reward until you spend in the way of Allah. From that which you love, and whatever you spend indeed, Allah is knowing of it." And the work continues. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause to those amazing peace builders. We're not done, but we are going to take a quick break. We have some refreshments outside, and we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. One request, this is a sacred space, and so please eat our refreshments outside. Do not bring in the refreshments back inside. And when we come back, we're going to be able to do a Q&A, and I've prepared some closing remarks about what I've learned at this conference today, this week. And so we'll break right now for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll rejoin the conference. Please be back at 10:40 in your seats. Thank you. And the refreshments are outside, right outside here. Well, we look forward to now being able to actually do a Q&A. I think the plan right now is we're gonna skip discussion and open up the audience. I know we've got a lot of students here, professors, lots of different people, and we hope that you'll have questions for our panelists today, including Seamus, if you have some, about the work they're doing, or about the challenges that they face, or the progress that they're seeing, whatever it is that you're interested in. We hope we give a few minutes to ask the follow-up questions that you have. Are we going to have a mic in the audience? Actually, just talk loud. Okay, Sydney's going to do it. Sydney's got the mic in the audience. And just please direct your question to whoever you'd like to talk to. Melissa's up first.
Thanks so much for those awesome presentations. How do you decide when to tell someone to stop doing what they're already doing and do what you want them to do, which I heard, and when you should just stop saying what you're saying and change to reflect them, right? There's like, I've heard in almost all of your presentations that kind of, we have this practice, we like to introduce and we like to have you do this thing and then it will change your life. And then in other ways you come in and you like see what they're doing and then you kind of work with what they've already got. Okay, I've heard both kinds of things. How do you like make that distinction between not being an imperialist and whatever the other version of that is. I'm confused right now. Paper.
All right, who wants to take that one? Hey, Emma's going to take it.
I can take it. I love that question. And I was lucky because I had the training like right from the get-go here. But I think for me, it wasn't about getting them to do what I wanted them to do. It was about helping them to see humanity in each other. And we did that through dance. Everything we did was culturally identifiable, meaning even the clothing I'm wearing comes from those tribes that they gave me. The shoes I was wearing were made from the people there. So learning how they dress, learning what's important, how to honor elders, and then creating a safe space like the conference has done where people can actually tell their stories. And once they start hearing their stories, it changes the way that they start viewing people because they see that the people that are telling stories have experienced similar accounts that they've experienced. So I'm not sure about everybody else, but that's kind of how we work that. But it took years.
I would say similar, relationships. Spent before we formed Groundwork, 3+ years of just building relationships, and then individuals in that community that are from that community, like Brian Moore he's here today, I'm so glad he's here, building relationships over time so that when we come into a community, which isn't our own, none of us are from Salem, we have relationships of influence to be able to leverage. And I would say I'd do the same thing if I went to another community. I would find the Brian Moores, I would find individuals like that have relationships and have influence and work through them in order to get an audience, if you will, or to have an impact. So it all came down to relationships and then being willing myself to reveal some of my own humanity also. I think we emphasize so much seeing others' humanity, but equally we have to reveal our own to other people.
I want to hit up Seamus with this question as well because I see this unique opportunity of a rare turn of events where the Pacific is now colonizing Utah and doTerra. And he's bringing these ideas, and it's a really important part of what you do. So I'm curious how that's gone.
I don't know how to colonize it. We are 0.1%. We're not even a percent in Utah, the Polynesians, but I think the idea that always comes to my mind is that people want to belong. And so when I come into doTerra, I'm trying to find out how do we get people from all over the world, 4,000 employees, to belong to doTerra, to own not only the product, but own the values and what the company stands for. And the beautiful thing at doTerra is that you have got oils from all around the world. And so the idea I put forward is don't just extract the oil and use it to make money, but that oil belongs to a culture, it belongs to a people, and that therefore is our culture. And it resonated with everybody. Right, like I mentioned wintergreen. One of the main products of Deep Blue, which is one of the main products of doTerra, the Nepalese people, when they greet you, when they say namaste, they are literally saying, I see God in you. And people, I think everybody here can understand that that's something that I like to belong to because I believe that's what my grandparents taught me. My grandparents taught my ancestors left the legacy of taking care of people. And so that's kind of the idea. The idea was people want to belong, they want to own the values, they want the company to succeed, and so give them what they want. Help them recognize that they actually have it. And doTerra have one of them, and we did the same here at PCC with Chad. You know, I got to share one thing is that when I took the role at PCC, I didn't know what to do. So who do you call when you don't know what to do? Call Chad. When I got to doTerra, who do I call? I call Chad. Chad, can you come to doTerra? And he did, February, come up and did our very first leadership symposium on dangerous love. and people can own that. And now we associate that with the values that come from the cultures that the oils belong to. I don't know if I answered your question, Melissa.
What if there's something in the culture that's fairly harmful? Like what Adrian said, something in the culture is fairly, you see it's fairly harmful, like the caste system in India. And they say, sorry, we really love this caste system, we're people, and like it's really working for us. Then what do you say?
You want to take that? Let's let Louchrisha take that one.
So thanks for the question. So just building on the conversation, for us, relationships is really the foundation that we build, our trust with communities. And it's not going in and telling them like, hey, you need to do this, but it's getting them to understand the same vision or the good that's going to come from it if you adopt this way of doing things, and also taking into account, the traditional ways of people, addressing conflict conversations and managing relationships. So while we go in, we are very aware of that. They've been dealing with conflict for longer than I've been alive. So it's really a place where we also provide support. So we go in and we stay with them for quite a bit of time, and then they adopt it on their own. So it's more of a sustainable move towards making that change, and it's not from like, you need to do this. I hope that answers.
I want to interject something too, just briefly, if it's okay. I think for me, I somehow really fell in love with Nigeria, and I fell in love with the people and the various tribes and languages. But I think, remind me your name? Chris. They need to see you too, and I think for me, because I am of Latino culture, Mexican, at least 48% Mexican, which is a dirty word in the United States, to be quite honest, and even in a lot of part of Latin America. And so I understood what it felt. We had caste systems too in Nigeria, so I had an understanding of what it felt to be in the out group, and then a woman in peacebuilding, and a Latter-day Saint woman in peacebuilding. And so I think that using your own experiences and connecting you to the people in a really kind of holistic, pure way helps. And does it change everything? No, but it's a step. It's a start.
All right, thank you, Emma. Let's see, I saw Fred Axelgard back there with his hand up.
Thank you. One of the questions that's been on my mind the last few days has to do with time and the perception of time, the use of time. And it struck me when we began today thinking about bringing our ancestors together that, and the way, Emma, you just said a minute ago, take the last phrase, you said, and it takes time. When we talk about sustaining, our goal is to build relationships that need to last. All of this involves time. And I thought, how do you as young people deal with time? It isn't, when you're young, you have a different appreciation of the need for things to take time. But it struck me that maybe bringing ancestors together changes the way that everybody involved thinks about time. It works on your patience. I'll stop there. I hope time is an essential ingredient in everything you've talked about, but haven't talked directly about it. So
I'm going to hand the mic to Adrian, who's in their early infancy of a program and starts thinking about family, but also thinking about larger scale, and also, I know, in the Chinese culture, ancestors and time.
When we work with the community, it's really related to holistic questions too. It's cultural and structural values. The Chinese culture is just so deep that when you talk about time, people talk about thousands of years. And we all know Chinese history is all written for a long time. And the people that we're working with, they are fairly stubborn. And for me, I thought having one workshop, if not 2 workshops, or not 5 workshops, that may, they start to change. But that's not the answer. I know my parents, they worked with a family for 3 years. And it's still, according to them, a mess. And for me, you know, right now, for younger generation, I mean, we're all young, but for young generation, we love fast food. You know, everything quick, fast. You know, for me to come over to Hawaii, I'm not saying people are slow, but they're generally more laid back, okay? And I live in a city, and people who walk in my city, you probably think they're learning. So that's my perception of time. And for peace, I remember there was one article about, in Peacebuilding, we call the long short way and the short long way. And for me, to build peace is a long short way. We cannot take what do you call shortcut, right? I hope that answered your question.
We actually only have time for maybe one more question, so let's, any other hands that are, oh, Alexa, I like that. Sydney, Alexa. This is one of our peace building students.
Okay, this is for the alumni. How did you get started in what you're doing? I think for us, a lot of us going into peace building, it's kind of like going into psychology, you can do a lot. How did you get started and what put you on your path?
Chris, why don't you start?
Lots of prayer and ran risks and things for free. Trust, really, you know, it sounds really cliche and altruistic, but staying committed to President McKay's vision. And there was a lot of times where I was ready to give up on it, thinking like, oh, I can't do it. It's going to be too hard to do it. So that's probably not a really tangible answer. But that's what it comes down to. The Lord opens doors and people like Brian Moore, and I have a conversation with him on the phone, and then flies down from Oregon a week, 2 weeks later, and says, "We want you to come up here." And amazing things happen when you trust in God and trust in this amazing prophecy that we get to be a part of. So that's not like a here, do X, Y, and Z, and it'll happen. But that's what it's been like for me.
Yeah, my path is very connected to Chris. He kept
follows me around.
Yeah, he just creates opportunities for me, and I just jump in. But I would say the two things for me was stay connected and say yes. I just tried a bunch of stuff. I think like between graduating and ending up where I am now, I had like the randomest jobs. I worked for Anasazi, which I thought, who doesn't want to go live in the woods with a bunch of angry teenagers? Ended up being the best job I've ever had. Then I ended up working for a gap year program that took me to South America and working with young adults that way. And then I ended up working for Arbinger. Like I feel like I was given a lot of really great opportunity, but I had to say yes to it, even though it was scary and it was, I didn't really know where it was going to take me. And honestly, coming to Hawaii was one of those yeses that I had to say yes to. And then to stay connected, I texted Chris on his birthday, randomly. Well, it wasn't random, it was his birthday, but I texted him and just said, "Hey Chris, happy birthday. Always thought just very highly of you and I hope you're doing well." And his response was, "Thanks, Kasha. Arbinger's hiring, do you want a job?" And I really do think that it was the relationship that I built. I didn't even know Chris thought I was that cool. He was just like the guy that I did peacebuilding classes with. But he's sung my praises for lots of years, and he's one of the reasons. I give him a lot of credit, but people will push it back on me. He's just a very strong reason that I am where I am today, and that wouldn't have been the case if I hadn't fostered that connection and relationship.
Yeah, I feel like my advice is going to be really similar to Kasha's. Chris is a trailblazer in peace building, and I think a lot of Adrian and the rest of us as well. I feel like I'm similar to Kasha, that Chris's trailblazing helped provide opportunities for me, obviously. But I think kind of to build on what Kasha said, I think not only staying connected, but getting connected. So if you know what you want to do in peace building, mediation, facilitation, I also do, in addition to this, evaluation. Finding someone else who is a trailblazer in that, or who is just in that field, and asking if they'll mentor you, asking if they'll help you. Not only do you build a connection there, but then you also build knowledge and skills. And in my experience, as this has been with Chris and with others, that people are genuinely absolutely very generous, especially if they're from the McKay Center and from the Peace Building program. They're very generous in wanting to actually mentor and connect you. And so I think there's that, and then I think the other part is just, it's better to do something than nothing. Even if you know exactly what you want to do and you're finding, oh, is this stopped? All right, 1 minute. So I can keep going. Hang on 1 minute. And let me just distill this pearl of wisdom now for you. Yeah, it's just better to do something than nothing. Like, even if you are doing exactly what your dream job is in peace building, if you can find anything that's connected to it and just start working there, it's better to do that than to be waiting around for this perfect ideal, not that you're doing that, but perfect ideal job.
Right, let's give it another round of applause. The big takeaway there is get to know Chris and Pineda. It's been a wonderful conference. Dream, really. You know, real life often doesn't actually look like dreams, but in many ways, this real life has exceeded that for me, and I think many people here. My remarks today are specifically directed to our peace builders, those who are teaching, those who are writing, those who are working in the field, who are discouraged, who are tired, and who wonder sometimes, is this all worth it? And Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." And he closed the book and sat down. And the eyes of all of them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say unto them, "This day is the scripture fulfilled in your ears." When he concluded his brief sermon, the congregation was first astounded and angry. The account ends with them casting Jesus out of the synagogue and attempting to throw him off a cliff. There's no record of Jesus ever returning to his home in Nazareth again. That's a tough way to start a ministry, a movement, a world-changing life. Biblical scholars have given numerous interpretations as to why the congregation was outraged at him that day. I am persuaded by John Henry Yoder's interpretation. Christ's message that day in Nazareth was an audacious one. Jesus spoke of peace, of hope, of justice, of forgiveness and reconciliation at a time when his congregation was suffering deep, intractable, violent conflict. The people of Israel were being crushed by the Roman Empire. They wanted the Messiah to fight, not love. Jesus was calling for something that most of us fail at miserably when we are enmeshed in conflict. The call was to turn first, to minister to the wounded spiritually, economically, and socially, to let go of our grudges and animosity, and to show forgiveness to those that hurt us, and to do everything in our power to make things right for those we have hurt. The acceptable year of the Lord he refers to, Yoder believed, was a call for Jubilee, a commandment given from God to Moses on Mount Sinai that was rarely, if ever, followed by the ancient Israelites. The Jubilee is about renewal, reconciliation, and shifting our mindset that acknowledges the hand of God in our lives. It was a call to restructure and restore the relationships among all people. It was an ecological response to the challenges of an interdependent world, and Christ was going to lead the way. Alas, today, when we speak about Jesus, we rarely talk about that message in Luke 4, nor do we talk about what happened to Jesus that day. It is as audacious today as it was back then. And the audacity of Jesus' message, of course, doesn't end there. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Audacious. "Love your enemies, do good to them which hate you." Audacious. "Bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you." Audacious. "Ye have heard it that it is said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. And whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother shall be in danger of judgment." Audacious. "Ye have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And Jesus said, I say not unto thee, until 7 times, but 70 times 7. Verily I say to you, insomuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. He that is without sin cast the first stone. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Ye are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. As I have loved you, love one another. By this shall men know that ye are my disciples, if you have loved one to another. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus had the audacity to spend his ministry with the poor, the destitute, the outcast. He audaciously mended the brokenhearted, delivered those in captivity, healed the blind, and set liberty to those that were bruised. He had the audacity to kneel in an olive grove in Gethsemane and bleed for every poor to atone for the sins of people who will reject him over and over again. He had the audacity to take upon him our infirmities, that his bowels may be filled with mercy, that he may know according to the flesh how to succor us according to our infirmities. The audacity to be beaten, crowned with thorns, forced to drag a cross up Golgotha, nailed to a cross by soldiers gambled beneath it. Yes, the message of Jesus is an audacious one in a world such as this. Isaiah correctly prophesied, he was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And he hid, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Jesus' path to building peace has either been ignored or rejected by many, including Christians and Latter-day Saints, some with the same vitriol of the people of Nazareth that day. For those, like me, that stumble on the path of Jesus' way, the justifications are plentiful. His way can or won't work in the harsh light of the broken world in which we live. The world is broken, and Jesus' call for love and reconciliation and justice lack the power to transform such a dangerous world. The peace spoken of by Jesus and the prophets appears in the harsh light of reality to be more aspirational than practical. It resides in the future and far away from the sorrows of this world and life. Human beings are incapable of living peaceably together. At the end of the day, the natural man always wins. Our only response is to endure it. And even I can concede that not all humans are incapable of loving one another, but the ones I'm in conflict with, they're definitely not. You don't know my spouse, child, boss, rival political party the way I do. I often find myself saying when mired in conflict, people may be able to change, but them, they'll never change. I have also felt overwhelmed by corrupt socio-political and cultural systems that set us up for failure. The system itself is rotten, rigged. There can be no peace or justice as long as they continue to stand, but I don't know how to tear them down. It seems more satisfying to condemn the wicked and tearing down structures that keep them in power than learning how to love and forgive them. Yes, in the middle of an unjust world where violence, inequality, and prejudice run rampant, where shooters are opening fire in schools, where countries like the Ukraine are being violently invaded, where so many hate their own blood. At times I've felt like it's not enough for God to weep. I want him to fight. Or at the very least, I want to fight on his behalf. I have been one at times in that congregation in Nazareth, feeling that the message is too audacious. It's not enough. As someone who has dedicated his life to teaching and practicing peace and following Christ too often, my heart has been at war, where I felt hopeless against the stampede of hate. To renounce war and to proclaim peace in the midst of the hardest, most complex, or long-lasting conflicts of our time is audacious. Proclaiming peace has not been, nor will it ever be easy. The cost of following Jesus, as the Maori learned, doesn't always come with a happy ending. If we are to renounce war and to proclaim peace like Jesus, it will be inconvenient at best, and for some, it may cost us our lives. Those with the courage to follow Jesus will be despised and rejected by a world unable or unwilling to believe there is a better way. There will be pain, sorrow, and hopelessness at times. Conflict, duality, and indifference will not, despite our best efforts, disappear in this life or the next. Our pre-mortal cosmology begins with a war in heaven and describes a weeping God. I deeply understand the pessimism of peace when so many relationships at home and in our community seem so broken and unrepairable. I understand the temptation to believe that peace is something Christ brings us in the next life, not something that is possible here. This is certainly a story that can and needs to be told. We need to acknowledge our fears and doubts, to be more self-critical and accountable for our struggles, personally and collectively, to follow Jesus. And in doing so, I and we need to embrace the principle of repentance and the gift of Jesus' grace. However, this is not the only story of the followers of God. Yes, we often fail to be the peace builders Christ calls us to be. However, in closing this morning, I want to acknowledge a cloud of witnesses, both our ancestors and our modern-day pioneers, who have walked or are walking, however imperfectly, the audacious path of peace that Christ set before us. Elder Neil A. Maxwell once stood here in Laie and said this: all who have had much experience serving as change agents in society realize that before change can occur, one of the most essential elements is the existence of a convincing model. If people feel something just can't be done, they are unlikely to attempt it. Even small models, though, can be great guides, because by small means the Lord can bring about great things. And he was referring to this place as one of those models. I want to acknowledge a few of those people who have provided for me and others, a convincing model of peace. There is a tradition in the Middle East with a group of Israelis and Palestinians that I work with, that when we are acknowledging our ancestors or the living that are digging the wells from which we drink, that we acknowledge our respect, our gratitude, by offering them a single reverent bow. As I speak of these people that have been such a great inspiration to me and others, I invite you, with me, after naming them, to offer them a single clap, if you feel so moved, to acknowledge them this morning. In doing so, I borrow the language of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed be Enoch, for having the audacity to overcome his fear, his young age and lack of eloquence, to partner with God to build Zion, a place where people dwelt in righteousness, where there were of one heart, one mind, and where there was no poor among them. Blessed be Esau, who had the audacity to forgive his brother Jacob, after having his birthright taken away, prompting Jacob to remark, "In you I see the face of God." Blessed be Abigail, for the audacity to rush out to meet an angry David, prostrating herself on the ground, begging for forgiveness for the actions of her husband, and in turn saving hundreds of lives, including David's. Blessed be the anti-Nephi-Lehis, who have the audacity to bury their weapons of war into the ground and have the courage to see their enemies as their brethren and to meet them on the battlefield not with anger, but with love, and to my knowledge, showing us the only instance of war in the Book of Mormon that ends with the aggressors repenting, dropping their weapons, and converting to become peaceable followers of Christ. And blessed be the Moriori, for giving us a powerful historical example that courage, and showing us the courage that the anti-Nephi-Lehi showed in the Book of Mormon is possible today in our world. Blessed be Joseph Smith, for the audacity to not only usher in the restoration, but for receiving the revelations in section 98 and 121 that remind us that God commands us to renounce war and proclaim peace, and that the powers of God can only be exercised by persuasion, by long-suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned, by kindness and pure knowledge and charity. Blessed be Emma Smith, for using the knowledge of the restoration to found the Relief Society that followed Christ's admonition to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, and to serve the least of these. Blessed be President Russell M. Nelson, who prophetically testifies audaciously that peace is possible, and for asking us to end the conflicts that are raging in our hearts, our homes, and in our lives. He's asked us to bury any and all inclinations to hurt others, and to do what we can to help the distressed, and to seek the Lord's help in ending any major conflicts. Blessed be the Kanaka Maoli, the indigenous people of this land, and the original inhabitants of Laie, who have audaciously endured the colonization and at times genocide of their people with aloha, and for their commitment to the motto, Ua mea ke e au ka aina I ka pono, to setting things right by restoring the life and sovereignty of the land. Blessed be President Cowley and Vice President Isaiah Walker, and all of the people at BYU-Hawaii who have supported this conference, and the Case Center for Intercultural Understanding, and the Intercultural Peacebuilding Program. With them, the audacious idea that our students can and should learn the doctrines, theories, and tools of peacemaking. Blessed be Spencer Fluman and the Maxwell Institute for their audacious commitment to giving a platform for LDS scholars to explore and write about the theology and practice of peace, and for their support to make this book and this conference a reality. Blessed be David Pulsifer for his audacious lifelong support of the ethic of nonviolence, and for the example both his scholarship and his life give us in stimulating our moral imaginations, and for creating the first ever peace-building program at BYU, Idaho. Blessed be Patrick Mason, who spurred my moral imagination as a young faculty member 15 years ago when he wrote The Audacious Possibilities of Mormon Peacebuilding, and who has been a tireless advocate for following the example of Jesus Christ above all else, and for his work creating a peacebuilding program now at Utah State. Blessed be Melissa Inouye, who just a week after receiving cancer treatment that would likely keep most of us in bed for a month, made the audacious choice to fly here, putting herself at risk so that she can teach us what it means to love our enemies and take the risk of embrace over the easier path of exclusion. Blessed be Adam Miller for having the audacity to approach the theology of Christ with creativity, humor, humility, and the passion in a way that has edified so many of us over the years and helped us grow closer to understanding his truths, and that perhaps our bodies do not have to eat, or do have to eat in the next life. Blessed be Ben Cook for the audacity to pioneer peace and conflict resolution at BYU, the law school in the Wasatch Valley. His leadership there is transforming the way that the university and the people of Utah are thinking about conflict and peace building. Blessed be Kim Makakau for welcoming us into this marae, the spiritual center of the PCC, and for having the audacity to come to my office a decade ago with the most humble of requests: I want to change. And in doing so, changing the hearts and minds of so many others here at the Polynesian Cultural Center and BYU-Hawaii. Blessed be Seamus Fitzgerald for the audacity to change the culture at the PCC in a way that more accurately reflected the founding principles and teachings of the Savior of both of our institutions, teaching us the wisdom and peace-building skills of the Maori people. He aha te mea nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Blessed be Tabitha Ka'ili for his leadership as our dean and for the audacity to insist and advocate for that our knowledge of peace needs to be decolonized and the truths of the indigenous people of the Pacific be recognized, respected, and understood. Blessed be Christina Akanoa for the audacity as a political science professor to engage with us peace builders here and to teach us that our way of seeing the world is not the only way, and for sharing the beautiful practice of Iponga as an example of how justice can be restorative instead of destructive. Blessed be Eliza Elkington. You did not hear from today, but who has taught our keiki here in Laie and in Sunset for the past 2 decades, and has taught them the basics of peace while peace building between angry parents semester after semester. Blessed be Miss Louchrisha Hussain for the audacity to lead the people of Fiji, both indigenous and Indo, away from polarization and division and toward a space of collaboration and harmony. Blessed be Chris Pineda, Kasha Coombs, and TK Ford, and the Mountain West team for the audacity to take what they've learned here and develop a program that is truly changing an entire city of politicians, teachers, law enforcement officers, clergy, and the people of Salem. Blessed be Adrian Chan and his father, Adrian Chan, for taking the audacious step of being a pioneer peace builder in Hong Kong. To Jimmy, who's not here with us tonight, for literally changing professions so that he could support his son in what he learned here. And to Adrian for the courage and creativity he has shown in adapting what he's learned to work in his home country. Blessed be Ema Billings for the audacity to step in the middle of violent conflict in Nigeria and risk her life for the last decade to bring peace to people that she loves. Blessed be David Whippy, a former rap star named Fiji, who had the audacity to leave behind a career that could have brought fame and fortune and take up the cause of peace, both in Fiji and here at BYU-Hawaii. I don't know of anyone who more accurately embodies the vision that President McKay had about our alumni than David Whippy. Blessed be the students and alumni of BYU-Hawaii. who have made the audacious choice to study and practice peace building despite objections from parents, ridicule from classmates, and much hand-wringing over how am I going to make a living at this. Thank you for choosing to live into the motto that stands outside our campus, enter to learn, go forth to serve. Blessed be David O. McKay for the audacious vision 100 years ago that if you brought people together from all over the world and taught them Jesus' way, that they could become, as he prophesied, influences towards the establishment of peace internationally. This is the second time this has happened to me here in 16 years. Here. I feel his presence here with us today. And I hope he can look down on all of us here, the many peace builders throughout the world who aren't, and say as Jesus did at the beginning of his ministry in Nazareth, this day is the prophecy fulfilled in your ears. From this school, young men and women will be influences towards the establishment of peace internationally. Blessed be Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, the Messiah, the Savior of the world. May he change our stony hearts into fleshy ones. May he give us courage and wisdom to follow his path. May he give us the strength to love one another so that by this shall the world know we are his disciples. May he help us make a way out of no way.